Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years. We're dedicated to delivering quality auto parts, expert customer service, fast and free shipping, all backed by our 100% satisfaction guarantee. So visit us at 1AAuto.com, your trusted source for quality auto parts.
In this video, we're going to be working with our 2006 Chrysler 300 3.5 liter V6. We're going to show you how to remove and replace the engine's upper intake manifold. If you like this video, please click subscribe. We have a ton more information on this car as well as many other makes and models. And if you need parts for your vehicle, you can follow the link down in the description over to 1AAuto.com. Here are the items you'll need for this repair. To remove your intake manifold, we'll loosen the clamp at the throttle body with a flat blade screwdriver. You may want to disconnect this sensor. Looks like ours has been glued on because the clip is broken. So you can also simply pop it out of the boot. Disconnect these two hoses from the back of the intake located just behind the throttle body. These just pop off by hand. There's one more at the back of the manifold. Pull back on the red safety tab, push down and disconnect the sensor from the top of the intake, as well as the two electrical connectors at the front. Disconnect the connector from the throttle body. Again, we have one of those little red safety tabs we have to push down. And then we'll push down the tab and remove the connector. We'll remove the two 10mm nuts from the throttle body, the 7 10mm bolts from the center of the intake manifold here, as well as the two 10mm nuts over on the passenger side of the intake manifold. We'll do this using a 10mm socket and ratchet where we can, and a 10mm wrench where it's a little too tight. Remove the two 15mm bolts at the bottom of the throttle body bracket. We're doing this with a 15mm socket and ratchet. And remove the bracket from the throttle body. There's a 15mm bolt at the bottom of the bracket on the passenger side of the intake manifold, both front and rear. We'll loosen those up with a 15mm wrench so we can slide them off of the studs. Once you've loosened the brackets, go ahead and slide them off the studs. Now we'll lift up on the intake manifold, slide it forward to release it from the EGR tube at the back. Once you're off that tube, lift up, being careful for that transmission dipstick, and remove the manifold from the vehicle. While the top of the intake manifold is exposed, we're going to wad some paper towels in there just to keep any dirt and debris from getting in there while we're working. Remove the paper towels from the intake. Clean down this mating surface with some solvent and paper towels or a clean rag. Once again, I'm using a brake cleaner here, but there's a variety of solvents you can use to get all of that old debris and oil off. Install your PCV breather tube on the back of the valve cover. It's even got a nice little marking on it that says PCV with an arrow so you know which end goes where. The other end should fall just about over here where the back of the intake will be. Remove the old gasket from your intake manifold using a small straight pick here just to get in there and start popping it out. You should be able to remove the rest by hand. Install your new gasket. Line up, press that in. Our old EGR seal is damaged, so we'll remove that. Install our new one. Make sure it sits all the way back against its edge. Reinstall your intake manifold, being sure to set the opening for the automatic transmission dipstick into its proper place on the manifold. You'll also want to be careful for the bolts. We'll have to line up our EGR tube as well. Just be mindful of all of these things while we set it into place. Once the EGR tube is set and the intake is laid down onto the lower manifold, click your automatic transmission dipstick back into place and start all of the 10mm bolts by hand, just a couple of threads to make sure they're all lined up before we tighten them down. Tighten up the 7 10mm bolts at the center of the intake. We're not going to tighten these down all the way yet, you just want them a little bit and then we'll have to torque them. Torque these bolts to 9 foot-pounds. The manufacturer's specification is 150 inch-pounds. However, it's a lot easier to do with this wrench, and that number rounds up to about 9 foot-pounds. We want to start these in the center and work our way out in a cross pattern. Reconnect the map sensor, push the safety into place, reconnect the 2 intake tuner valve control. Reinstall the support brackets at the front and rear on the passenger side of the intake. We'll start those 10mm on, just a couple of threads to keep it in place. Using a 15mm socket and ratchet, we'll tighten up those 2 bolts all the way at the bottom of those support brackets. Once the bottom of the support brackets are tightened down, you can use a 10mm socket and ratchet to finish tightening up the top 2 bolts. Reconnect the PCV hose on this fitting closest to the EGR tube. Then we have our small hose here, large hose next to that. Reconnect the electrical connector onto the throttle body, lock the safety tab back into place. You can now set the support bracket back over the throttle body bolts. Make sure it doesn't get caught up in any of the wiring down below. We'll spin our 2 10mm nuts on at the top by hand just to keep that in place. Reinstall the 2 15mm bolts at the bottom of the bracket by hand. Tighten up the 2 15mm bolts at the bottom of the bracket with your socket and ratchet. Tighten up the 2 10mm nuts at the top. Install the other end of the intake boot onto the throttle body. Tighten it up with your flat blade screwdriver. Reinstall the coolant tank line bracket on the side of the intake tube. Reinstall the map sensor into the intake tube. And earlier when we removed our intake, I wanted to wait until we had the intake tube reinstalled to make sure this all lined up properly. Now that we've got it where it needs to be, we'll go ahead and tighten that down.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at 1AAuto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.